Midtown Studios of Bloomberg Television in New York City, this is Charlie Rose.
Director Wes Craven has kept audiences on the edge of their seats for more than 25 years, but the director of such hits as Nightmare on Elm Street and Wes Craven's new Nightmare has not always been involved in the film industry. Raised a devout Baptist in Ohio, he was taught that movies were tools of the devil, and he never saw a film until he was in college. He spent years teaching high school and college before he discovered his love of filmmaking. His latest effort is Scream, and I am pleased to have Wes Craven join us now for a conversation about a film which is more than simply a horror film. It's more of a thriller than it is a horror film. Welcome.
Thank you.
Is that fair to say? This is more of a thriller than it is sort of
yes.
Typical.
It's a thriller.
This is
about,
not Nightmare on Elm Street.
No, it's all set in the real world.
Yeah.
But it's a thriller about kids who love horror films. So,
yeah. How did it get started? I mean, who wrote the script and who brought it to you? And
the script was written by a young writer, Kevin Williamson. I believe it's only his second script to have sold.
Yeah.
As soon as it hit Los Angeles, I understand there was a huge bidding war, and I think it sold over a weekend for a very large sum. And it was purchased by Miramax. And as soon as I actually read it that weekend also, because somebody in my development department, Lisa Harrison, said, "You have to read this."
Yeah, go home right now and start reading.
And it's the kind of script you read the first 14 pages, which are the first 15 minutes of the movie, and you cannot tear yourself away from it.
It's
just a real page turner. Yeah. And
I have a theory about it. Let me interrupt you. I'll even come back to you soon.
Sure.
For me, for the most 9 times out of 10, I can tell whether I'm going to like a movie in the first 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I find myself rarely being bored to death at the beginning or uninterested, and then finding myself halfway into it, thrilled by what's happening.
Right. It's like an Antonioni film or something.
Yeah.
You know, it's a long build. But
right.
Yeah, it's very much, in fact, I quite often say to the people that work with me, read the first 10 pages. If it doesn't grab you,
then forget
you
it.
have to have 15 scripts to read that weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this grabbed you right away.
It grabbed you right away. So the whole opening with Drew Barrymore is just, you know.
But I mean, Drew Barrymore played, what, how many seconds is she in this film?
Oh, she's in for, and I'm giving it away. She's in the first 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean.
But she is the first 15 minutes.
Then she leaves.
Yes.
Now, was she anxious to do it?
Yes. She was attached to it before I was.
Really?
She loved it.
For that character?
Yep. She saw it as the Janet Leigh
she
moment,
saw it,
you know. So.
Yeah, at the Janet Leigh moment in the shower.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, you know, just the matter of having a very strong presence in a film and then suddenly being taken away from the audience, so the audience is really disoriented.
Yeah.
I think it accomplishes that feeling like you don't know what the filmmaker's going to do next if that happens. You know.
What's the story?
Well, the story is really quite simple, but sort of devilishly clever. It's the story of 4 or 5 kids who all, as most kids have grown up on horror films, slasher films, whatever you want to call them. And somebody begins a series of murders in their hometown that are very closely attached to the general styles of certain horror films. And very quickly it devolves that this person is now after one of the principals of this group of kids, Nev Campbell's character. And he is using the techniques, the situations from these horror films. So there's a continual sort of feedback loop between the kids of how to anticipate what's going to happen next, how to survive, and what the rules are of horror films. And beneath the surface of that, because that's kind of the obvious hook, there's a very interesting sort of study of how the kids' perception of what violence is and how do you deal with it, how it switches from their film idea, because they're such fans of these films and find them sort of entertaining, they have to sort of change everything to account for it when it actually happens to them in real life. So it's a very interesting sort of film within a film.
Here is Drew Barrymore playing Casey when she gets the first phone call from the killer. Take a look.
Hello?
Hello?
Who is this?
You tell me your name, I'll tell you mine.
I don't think so.
What's that noise?
Popcorn.
You making popcorn?
Uh-huh.
I only eat popcorn at the movies.
Well, I'm getting ready to watch a video.
Really? What?
Oh, just some scary movie.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
You never told me your name.
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.
That gets your attention, doesn't it? Yeah. let me talk a little bit about you, and we'll come back to this film. I said a little bit in the introduction about your parents thought films were the work of the devil.
Yeah.
So, and you never saw movies
wasn't
until
quite
you were
presented in quite that
okay.
cartoon
I
level.
don't want to make them sound cartoonish, but the notion was you didn't see any movies,
right.
And the notion was until high school, right? Or when was it? Did you first?
Actually, senior in college.
Senior in college. You saw your first film.
First non-Disney film. Disney films were considered
exempt.
Okay.
They were okay.
They were exempt, but a commercial film about a serious subject. Yes.
Yeah.
First time in college, and it was a college actually. It was also very strong religiously. I can't say the word. So I would have been expelled if they had caught me going to that theater. I hitchhiked to another town and saw To Kill a Mockingbird, and that was my first film.
What a great film to see! It's your first one.
It was wonderful. And it really put the lie to the whole notion that films were inherently evil. I mean, at that moment I realized this cannot be, because it was such a great film. You know? It's like, how can you say this is bad, or could harm you?
You read a lot. You wanted to be a teacher. Yes.
Yeah.
You went on to become a teacher.
Well, I wanted to be a writer. I actually, I was very fortunate to have a mother who took me to the library all the time. Yeah. So I was like a voracious reader, and then I worked at the Cleveland Public Library main branch as a page when I was like 14. So I was being given all these great books,
There are NBC pages and there are Cleveland Public Library pages.
Yeah. But, my first exposure really was to books. So that was what really gave me the foundation, I think, in story that was so important. And I wanted to write. I went to Johns Hopkins writing seminars and studied there with Baltimore poet Eliot Coleman, and got a master's degree in philosophy and writing. So I found with that I could teach. So I started teaching while I was writing. But what I discovered after four years of teaching college was that I would send out a manuscript and I'd come back like a year later with a rejection slip, and I just realized I'm out of the loop. I have to go someplace where I'm in it. Yeah. And at the same time, I bought a camera just for the heck of it, a 16mm camera. Students saw that I had it. They said, let's start a film club. I said, okay. We made a very fast, like a Mission Impossible spoof. It showed at all the colleges around, made all of our money back about 5 times. And at the end of the year, my department chairman said, you have to get serious now and get your PhD and start publishing. And I said, I'm going to go make movies. It was just that sort of stupid, and I went off to New York and did not get in. I mean, I came down here thinking I can get a job as an editor. I'd read enough to know that was a skill. I didn't get a job. I went back and had to teach a year of high school. Yeah. And then there was that second decision of, am I going to try again, So I did, and finally, at the end of the summer, having not found a job still, I was married, had 2 kids, I took a job as a messenger here and just got my foot in the door in a film management post-production house. And that proved to be the key. A year and a half later, I got a chance to direct my first film.
A year and a half later?
Yep.
How did that happen?
Well, it's, when you're 30 and have taught college, you have skills. So I moved relatively rapidly. I was doing, rewrites. I was learning. I had the good fortune of a student of mine, Steve Chapin. Older brother was Harry Chapin, who before he was the folk singer was a crackerjack filmmaker, documentaries and so forth. So he taught me the basics. So I moved pretty quickly. And then the first film I got a chance to do, I mean, it was a tiny, tiny film. The whole budget was $90,000. So it was just somebody, a group of theater owners in Boston wanted a scary movie, and my boss at that time, Sean Cunningham, said, look, I know you want to be a filmmaker. If you want to write something scary, you can direct it. And you can cut it, too. So that was the sort of premise.
But did that lock you into a genre?
Yes, it did. Yeah.
And do you regret that at all? I mean, it's been very profitable for you.
It's been profitable.
And you've got a chance to make a lot of films.
Yeah. I've made probably between television movies and theatrical movies, probably 20, 25 films. So, and I've been working most of the time.
But has been it hard for you to go to Hollywood and say, I can do something beyond, as good as these horror films are?
That's very difficult. Because I made my first 2 films.
I want to make a love story.
Yeah.
I want to make
Forget it.
Yeah. Forget it.
Yeah. They'll say, well, but we have something here on witchcraft. Or we have,
because we know it'll make money, and we know you know how to do that.
Right.
Stick to what you know.
I mean, it's the fact that, filmmaking is so darn expensive that you can understand them in a way hedging their bets.
They want to minimize the risk.
Right, exactly.
And maximize the possibility of the upturn.
So somewhere along the line, you have to get that shot to do a different kind of film where not that much is at stake.
Now, is this in any way that for you, in a sense, reaching out a little bit?
Yes. Yeah. I think even my last film was, Wes Craven's New Nightmare was 10th anniversary of the whole Nightmare series.
Yeah.
And I took it completely out of the films and made it about the people who made the film.
This is the Eddie Murphy thing.
No, that was Vampire in Brooklyn.
That was Vampire in Brooklyn.
So that was kind of a self-conscious deconstructionist, as somebody called that film. And Scream is very much about the whole world of kids who watch these films, and you know how it affects their idea of reality. And you know, it's a very intelligent script, so it attracted a lot of really good actors and actresses, and attracted me.
What do you really want to do?
Well, I'd like to be able to be part of a spectrum. You know, the filmmaker that really epitomizes that for me is like a Polanski, who came out of obviously a horrendous background of Europe and during the Nazi period, and yet, as well as doing very, very frightening films like Rosemary's Baby or The Tenant, or has done Tess, and has done other beautiful films. If I could have that kind of range to be able to go back and forth, I would be exquisitely happy. But it doesn't happen that much in American film. So.
I can't tell you how naive I am, but just explain me this. You're Wes Craven, and you go to the studios, and you say, let's assume Scream does as well as it continues to do as well as it does. It's already made $60 million. It'll soon be the second largest filmmaking success for Miramax, Pulp Fiction being number one, yes, which is a huge international success. You go to a studio, and you say, I'll make you another Scream if you'll let me make this film that I very much want to do. Mm-hmm. I guarantee it'll be a good script, but you may not think of me because it's not what I've been doing, but I want to do it. Won't they make that deal?
Well, happily, that deal has now been made, and it's with Miramax, so that's, to me, is the best of all possible worlds, because, Miramax is an extraordinary place. I mean, I don't think there's another place like it.
Because they take risk on things that are not obvious.
Well, it's like, it's just two brothers, Bob and Harvey Weinstein. I feel like they're like Louis B. Mayer type people. I mean, they are very, very intelligent, and they're also really, they have a sense of the street, of the audience. They're not like often some ivory tower making movies for, whoever the publicity department gives them an abstract. This is our target audience. It's not like that. They just go off of their gut feelings. So based on the success of this, they have offered me that, pretty much of that deal. I will make a film. My next film will be actually a very, very good script by Scott Rosenberg, who wrote Things to Do in Denver and
right.
Beautiful Girls. It's somewhat in the genre, but it's a very interesting, quirky thriller. And the second film they're going to allow me to do is probably going to be this, based on the documentary Small Wonders, which tells the story of a New York school teacher of music who teaches classic violin, and the state cuts her program, and she decides with her husband to go on their own savings and continue it. So not only will I be doing another genre film, but I'll be doing a really, really interesting one, a Miramax Dimension sort of one that is, they are the ones that saw
a documentary film
with
with commercial values.
But I'll also be doing, the second film, which will be, just an art house film.
Tell me the secret to thrillers and horror films. I mean, is there, if you're Tom Clancy and I said, what do you have to do to make these things work? He would say to me, you got to have, or John Grisham, you got to have what they do, big bestseller. You got to have authenticity. You got to know something about some subject, whether it's the law or high-tech weaponry.
Right.
You got to do that to make it different. And then what you have to do is figure out a way to make them turn the page from one chapter to another, to move the action along.
Right.
What do you have to do to make a horror film?
I think horror films are really, and I can only talk about the ones I've made, because I don't go out and study other horror films, but what I think is you're dealing with fear. Basically, you're dealing with fear, and you have to get through to those fears. And in that way, you have to know what people are really afraid of these days, as opposed to even 10 years ago, And then you have to cross the line so that you can elucidate those fears in a way, put them into a film in a way that goes beyond necessarily good taste or what is proper in the society to speak about or what the MPAA feels comfortable allowing you to do. You have to go into those sort of forbidden areas. And so you're probably off the blocks, you're going to be making a film that's upsetting to adults and to the establishment. But at the same time, we'll have sort of an electric attraction to kids, I would say anywhere from, I get fan letters from 6-year-olds, but it goes up basically through college, that are, in that sort of transitional period between childhood and adulthood, and are having serious perceptions of what the adult world is like, the scariness of it. Yeah. And yet they have sort of the openness of childhood. And So they're trying to deal with who the parents really are in this new way of looking at things, what the society is like that they're going into, who they are as a body that's changing and, you know, entering into interfaces with girls and everything else.
And what are the fears today that were not fears 10 years ago, or what are the new fears?
Well, I think it's been evolving much more and more towards the sort of deadliness of the adults. That Freddy Krueger was a good example, where it is an adult male figure who has your worst interest at heart. And in that sense, it's like a lot of the kids I talk to say, well, you know, here we are, we don't know what we want to do with our lives because it's sort of an end game anyway. The world's running out of resources, the adults have totally screwed it up, everything's polluted, you know, and animal species are dying out, the biggest die-offs in Simplicity or something like that. You know, so they have the feeling like the adults have sort of taken whatever they could get and screwed the kids. So there's this perception that sort of the adults are crazy, you know, and that is a very strong one. So, you know, that sort of, that figure that is older than you and knows much more than you, but really is taking his amusement from getting you, is very, very frightening to kids.
Now, there's a story that I've heard about you, and I don't know it well, so you got to tell me, help me. You and your brother, I think, you look down, and you see somebody, a man and a cat, on the street.
Yeah.
And you imagine that he comes to knock your door.
No, that part wasn't imaginary.
He did that.
Yeah, if my brother was asleep in a different room, I was probably 9 years old and heard this sort of scraping, muttering footsteps outside my window.
It's nighttime.
Night, Cleveland, Ohio,
Right.
living in a second-story apartment, and I looked through my window.
Is it raining? Is there a street light? And, you know,
Street lights, long shadows.
Yeah.
But this man mumbling sort of stopped and looked directly up into the window. And I thought I was completely hidden by the darkness in my room, and just fixed his eyes on me. And you know, it was just one of those things like he somehow knew me. And I sort of faded back into the shadows, and I sat on the edge of my bed and remember just, okay, I'll just sit here and count until he goes away. And I counted a minute, 2 minutes, you know. And then I thought, well, he must have gone. And I didn't hear him, but he couldn't be there that long. I went back to the window, and he was there, and he just went, you know, and started walking.
He saw you the second time?
Just like he hadn't taken his eyes off that window. And started walking down the sidewalk, looking over his shoulder at me, and then turned the corner, and I knew that was the entrance to our building on that, around the corner. So I ran to our front door, and sure enough, you could hear the front door opening downstairs. So that's when my brother came into it. I woke him up, and first they didn't believe me, and then he got a baseball bat and went out, and the guy was gone. So, you know, looking at it as an adult many years later, it's probably some guy that was drunk and was having fun scaring a kid. But that, to me, for some reason, was absolutely chilling.
And that became Freddy Krueger?
That sort of adult that took his delight in scaring a kid,
Let me take another look at a clip from Scream. Here it is. This is when Randy, Jamie Kennedy, explains the rules of how to stay alive in horror films, remembering the horror films are a part of the script, a part of the storyline in Scream. Here it is.
Certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a scary movie. For instance, number 1, you can never have sex. Big no-no! Big no-no!
Dead man.
Even in popcorn, sex equals death, okay? Number 2, you can never drink or do drugs. No, the sin factor. It's a sin. It's an extension of number 1. And number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
I'm getting another beer. You want one?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be right back.
Can you go too far? Can you make it too gory, too violent, too something, too scary?
I don't think you can make it too scary because, I mean, just by the situation, nobody is being led into these theaters, you know, in shackles. Everybody can get up and walk out.
They come for a thrill.
Time. Well, they come to be scared. They come for something happens in these films.
They come for escape, don't they?
I'm not sure. This certainly isn't like a Disney movie where you come out just feeling like all's well in the world or everything's hunky-dory, but they do come for a
But it's a film
release.
that grabs you
Yes.
and shakes you,
Yes. There's something
which takes
visceral.
you away from popcorn.
Well, you know, I think, you know, people often ask me, you know, why do people want to go and be scared? And my answer is that people don't want to go and be scared. They are scared. That we have resident fears, you know, from real things. I mean, let's not forget real life, you know. So the reason I think this works for kids is that those fears are evoked in these movies and brought out in the course of the story in a way that it has some resolution at the end.
Thanks for coming. Great to see you.
Been a pleasure. Thanks.
Wes Craven, Scream, doing very well at the box office. We'll be right back. Stay with us.